Shit. What are New Jersey looks like the place to be for one.
Big hair, big boobs, big rooms. That's all they do out here. Yeah.
Big Tuscan energy.
Yeah. Big personalities. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're listening to the 2 Month Review, the weekly podcast brought to you by Open Letter at the University of Rochester. We are a podcast that goes and takes a book or two, breaks it down, reads a bit week by each week, talks about it, analyzes it, has fun, makes jokes. I am Chad Post from
Too
Open Letter.
many, too many jokes. Too
Too
many
many
jokes.
jokes.
I
There's
came, I
more
came
jokes than
back.
that
I came
analysis. I
back.
can tell you that.
Yeah. Now I came back here to the scene of the crime in order to guarantee that there's not going to be too many jokes this time.
You're getting out of
We're just
control of the
gonna
jokes. That
Yeah,
voice that
yeah.
you're hearing, if you're listening to this instead of watching on YouTube, which if you're watching on YouTube, smash the like button, all that kind of stuff, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. But the voice you're hearing, if you're listening, is Rodrigo Fresán, author of Melville, the book that we've been talking about the past 4 weeks. And he's joined us today to be the special guest to talk about the book as a whole. And as always, my co-hosts are Brian Wood, author of Joytime Killbox, and Kaija Straumanis, translator from Latvian and executive editor at Open Letter Books.
I think my title changes every single
I don't know what it
time.
is. Senior editor, executive editor, who cares? It's all the same thing.
I'm a director of Lady Words at Open.
I mean, if you're the director of editorial, but you direct no one. So like, it's kind of like a nonsense title.
That's what you think, puppet.
What are you, the Elon Musk? You're the just
I think I prefer the
I,
laughs. I think I prefer the laughs to this sort of Ingmar Bergman discussion between you and Kaija.
When mom and dad are fighting on the podcast, yeah, we don't want
Yeah,
that.
very Latvian, very Latvian.
Oh.
They're Latvian blocking the Trump. So, Rodrigo, thank you for coming on here. It's really good to see you again.
My pleasure.
We've been having a great time reading the book and talking about it. And today, for anyone listening, like we've all finished the book, so we're talking about it as a whole today. So there's no more spoilers, I guess. Like we can spoil it all because supposedly everyone's read it. So, Rodrigo, I guess maybe we should start with you. And you talk about this a bit at the end, because there's a section that you call, what is the exact title of it? It is blah, 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 your names or the acknowledgments that begins with a picture that we've been talking about of Ellen
Yeah,
Melville. And then it does have your list of acknowledgments of everyone and the things that influenced you. But it opens with a bit about kind of the beginning, the origins of this book, and also like your, hesitancy slash like relationship to like books about authors. So I just wanted to ask you if you want to start with like, why did you decide to write this book and how did this come about?
I just to tell you the truth, of course, I adore Melville. I will keep on reading and rereading Moby Dick until the end of times or the end of my times. But what really drives me to read it, really, it was the idea of a father crossing a frozen river. That was all. I read about that image. I think this is something someday I want to explore. But being part of the same exploration, I mean, all my books are about reading and writing and about, in a way, father and sons. There's all it's always there. It's some sort of recurrent. Sometimes it's a dream. Sometimes it's a nightmare. Sometimes even some kind of I can't sleep. So, so
Yeah.
but I really like the idea. I really like the idea of someone trying to get home, crossing a frozen river. I read that on a Melville biography. That sort. It's a very short episode, and in fact, Alan Melville takes not many 2 pages in any Melville biography
Yeah.
because he died when Melville was very very young. So I really like to expand on that.
Yeah, and the way that you did it in here too is really interesting with like the focus on the father in part one, and then the sort of journey that kind of like essentially almost like the notebook that Herman Melville is writing in or writes down about his adventures about the Grand Tour, and then to have Herman Melville's part in the third part is like such a beautiful like sort of arrangement and makes a good symmetrical sense. Before I say anything else, I don't know if anyone noticed this, but between last week's episode and this week, there was thousands of people who gathered for a 25-hour-long Moby Dick reading marathon.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, in New Bedford, Massachusetts, just like a week ago. So apparently Moby Dick is hot right now. Melville is hot. Like for that, thousands is what the Smithsonian article says. Thousands.
Well, we're living on times of crazy captains, innocent sailors, and very dangerous leviathans. So it's pretty appropriate, I think.
Just to plug this a little bit more, so apparently this happens every year, and it's at the Whaling Museum in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and this year drew 2,500 people from 37 states and countries, including Australia, Brazil, and Sweden, who came to the reading. So,
Wow.
right. Yeah, you're right.
I should have been there.
You should have been there. I've
Yeah,
never
yeah.
heard of it until it popped up on like my news feed, and I flagged it
Okay.
and was like, "Oh, this is perfect for the conversation."
Yeah,
I went to the Gulf and did a reading of Old Man in the Sea. It took 38 minutes. That's kind of more my style, I think.
yeah. Yeah.
I mean, a Moby Dick reading I'd be down for. There was one like I don't know, maybe 9 months ago that was a nonstop reading of Making of Americans by Gertrude Stein. I was like, "Fuck,
Wow.
like thanks, but pass." I like that book a lot. But
Another
like,
interesting touch point, though, that's in this book a lot, and I'm seeing it, in the zeitgeist right now, is this fascination with the Odyssey.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it ebbs and flows, but there's the what is it? Ralph Fiennes playing
Christopher Nolan.
Odysseus, right? And then there's Christopher Nolan's going to be making a film about it as
Yeah,
well, I'm
sure.
sure.
Well, I think it was Chekhov who said that all world literature, you can boil it down to two ideas: a man leaves home, a man comes back home. That's all. That's all you
Yeah.
have to tell.
I teach that in my class because I don't know very much, and I just say there's only two stories, like coming or going. So
That's all. That's all.
A stranger comes to town or someone leaves.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But you're saying the Odyssey you see throughout in parts of Melville too, Brian?
Oh, and the third part of it, there was tons and tons and tons of it. I was really enjoying it, but I just realized like what a great time to have this translated and published here, because there's all this stuff stacking up that seems to be interested in Odysseus or Ulysses or however you want to call him,
Yeah.
for some reason. But
Very much. So I really like one of the things, I don't know where someone else can ask some questions on this too. I don't know where to start because you're here and like going into like trying to talk about the book itself and the various parts feels sort of intimidating because you can correct it. But one of the things that you reference in that back matter that also pops up a lot in this third part is the kind of connection between this and the part trilogy, between the invented part, remembered part, and dreamed part. And that there is like it's specifically referenced at a point in terms of like, oh, I'll, what I'll write is going to be remembered, invented, or dreamt. And I think that's really interesting because this does feel to me like almost like a coda to that whole trilogy. Like it's a new take on it. It's a new way of like processing what you said about like wanting to write about the creation of writing and like the way that it's there.
Yeah.
But it also feels like it like adds on to that, and which ends in such a dramatic way with the reunification and the reunion between the writer and his sister's son, his nephew. But then this kind of goes on for that father-son bit, but also like takes it just in a different way where it's another one of these like, how do you write and where did this come from ideas? It's not a question.
Well, as I told you, I think it's really interesting. For me, it's the most transgressive possible theme right now. It's reading and writing. I mean, it's almost subversive in a way, as a theme. And I always say that I don't have, I think it's Melville. It's like my book number, I don't know if it's 12 or 13. And I always say the same, I feel like there's all my books are like some sort of not really well discerned by the master plan of a house, and there are just different rooms of the same house. I really feel it like that. I really feel like this. And the book that came after Melville goes back to that again. It's this called The Style of the Elements.
Which open
It's
letter is
again,
publishing, by the way. So
I know,
uh,
Thank you very much.
that's not for your benefit. That's for the benefit of the listeners elsewhere. I hope you know that, but like I think mantra comes first, and then that does. But one question about that is that with the Style of the Elements, you refer to it in the back as being kind of a counterpart to Bottom of the Sky.
No, The Bottom of the Sky. It was the book I was writing, and it's almost finished. This companion to The Bottom of the Sky, it was like a novel I started to write, which was some sort of dystopian pandemic. No, and then COVID came, and I said I don't want to write this at this time. So I started Melville. I said I have to get as
God bless you for
far
that.
as possible of this, and I went to the 19th century and said, okay, Melville, please. I knock on Melville's doors and please let me in. Please let me in. I don't want to be outside.
But there is like between your books, I know Will's talked about this a number of times, and Will Vanderheiden, that is, in relation to the books that we haven't read in English that haven't been translated, and that there are lots of threads that sort of connect all the pieces. And coincidentally, sort of, I read Solo Viola by Antoine Volodine just like yesterday, and this is like, along with Melville, the best book I've read this year, which is 14, 15 days old, but nevertheless, like really blew my mind. It's fantastic. But Volodine's sort of similar in a sense that like all of his 49 books kind of tie into one another and are like hand in pieces. So he also has that idea of the house. And another person that seems to do that you reference in here, I believe, is Faulkner. Obviously with his, I'm not going to pronounce it right, County, but that is just as a true textual question. That is the author that you reference who adds the U to his name and says his mother is a fish, right?
Yep.
Yep.
That's a short story. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it's also As I Lay Dying.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I wanted to make sure I didn't screw that up. So
well, I think it was Faulkner who said that when he read Moby Dick. He said, "This is the book I wanted to have written, and it's already someone did it before me."
It tracks.
Yeah.
That tracks. And you get to write about vampires.
Sorry?
And you got to write about vampires.
Yeah, it was some sort of promise that I made myself since I was a kid. I wanted to write two things, a vampire novel and a ghost novel. And I think Melville it's my vampire novel, and The Style of the Elements is my ghost novel, where the ghost is the idea of the past, and the main character is it's a boy. When the book starts, he's a boy who is he's the son of two famous Argentinian publishers, intellectuals in the 60s and 70s, and they want his son to become a writer. They want to have like he's some sort of homunculus, We're going to have a writer. And he refuses that, and he decided that he just wants to be a reader, not a writer. And he ends up being a ghost writer, which is some sort of being like a reader of lives that are not his own, and at the same time a writer because he is obliged to write them.
That's true. So
that's my ghost novel.
So you get both. So in relation to this part, though, I was going to ask to switch this to you, Kai, and Brian. Like, what did you end up thinking, Brian? You specifically, you hadn't finished this before. You hadn't read it. So how did you find the last section and the book as a whole?
Let's see. How fun to talk about a book right in front of the person that wrote it.
I know, it's super intimidating.
Yeah.
No, I had a blast. In typical fashion, it gains more and more momentum, and depending on how much of the onion you want to peel into, there's so many layers by the end of it, so you can really get lost in it. One thing that I'm really annoyed about, I've never read Pierre, and I have to read Pierre now because it feels super important, at least for me.
It's amazing. It's an amazing book, a very strange book, and when you read it, it's completely deranged. It's like that. It's like some sort of Twilight as rewritten by David Lynch. It's
Yeah.
completely strange book.
Yeah.
And the interesting part that you keep on reminding yourself while you're reading it, it's like he tried to write a bestseller.
Mm-hmm.
That was his attempt.
Yeah.
Yeah, his
No,
most
no,
strange,
he was
surreal.
thinking that he's right. He was writing some sort of gothic novel that it was going to sell in the millions, and
Mhm.
the book is completely bonkers. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so strange, so strange.
Because like for me, I was fascinated that it's coming off of Moby Dick, and over time, um, people aren't going to really know or remember Pierre. They're all going to remember Moby Dick.
No,
It
and they're not going to remember another really, really strange and amazing book by Melville that is Clarel, that it's this very, very long poem. And I think it's the longest poem in the history of the United States.
oh wow.
And it's so strange also. It's a narrative poem. It's very,
Mhm.
very, very strange.
But for me, it reminds me of like I always like for instance in film, Francis Ford Coppola, we think of Apocalypse Now or we think of The Godfather, and there's this like lovely film, The Conversation,
Yeah,
that always gets buried and nobody remembers and nobody cares about it. And it's this like wonderfully perfect, strange,
amazing. Yeah,
amazing film. And so
yeah.
this Pierre thing made me kind of think of Coppola's um The Conversation. Do you have like within your work, do you have a book that you think is like a Pierre? Something that, man, I really love this book, but people overlook it. Or,
A book of mine, you mean?
yeah, is that something that like it's like was Pierre kind of like touching or inspiring or reminiscent of your own writing career in any way?
I I I don't know. I don't think I want to think about it. I want to have in an hour or something like that a nice cup of tea and go to bed and try to sleep
Yeah,
as peacefully as possible. And that sort of question is going to be in conflict with that idea, I think.
we'll do it off the record over some drinks next time I see you. I'll
Okay. Okay.
revisit Pierre. I'll read the book and then we'll discuss that. And
No, I don't know. In a way, I mean, of course, the person who writes the book it's a good reader of himself,
yeah.
but at the same time, it's not such a good reader of himself as a
Mhm.
good reader who didn't wrote the book is. I'm completely surprised, for example, with things that readers or reviewers said about my books. For example, the idea of that I'm a vanguardist or something like that, which is for me, why am I a vanguardist? Because I use parentheses, because I use semicolons, because I use footnotes. That's completely absurd to me.
So I fumbled the bag at the beginning of this episode, just FYI for everyone listening. Congratulations, Rodrigo. Melville is one of the finalists for the Republic of Consciousness Prize, one of the 10
Yeah,
long titles. So congratulations.
yeah,
You're alongside, so Melville is one of the ones, and then you're alongside Lesser Ruins by Mark Haber, who I know is a friend of yours,
yeah,
a fan of the
yeah.
podcast.
I wrote him today, and I told him, you're my favorite second candidate to win the prize. And he wrote me back and says Montaigne versus Melville,
Oh,
the
that's
final
true.
match. Yeah, true. It's an amazing novel. I really like Lesser Ruins.
Me too.
Amazing book.
Me too. If
Yeah.
anyone's interested, there is a 3% podcast that is an interview with Mark about Lesser Ruins. I'll link to it in the show notes, but we did that a couple months ago. Kai, you looked like you were going to jump in with that.
With what part?
The Republic of Consciousness Prize.
Oh, no, I was just applauding.
Oh, okay. Okay. Also, the person who set it all up, we talked to, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago was Lori Feathers, who was on this podcast to talk about the prize and about you, Rodrigo,
Yeah.
about
Melville
Melville.
is,
So good all
great.
things put together.
Definitely tampering. If or when Rodrigo wins, there's definitely tampering. I'm gonna do an investigation on this
You know, it's
immediately.
interesting. We've never had a book on the
Please
long
do.
list for this.
No, we haven't.
Like we always submit them, but like we've never had a book on the long list. So it's really cool to like finally do that and for it to be Melville, I think. I think it's
That's
perfect.
excellent.
Very happy.
Yeah, me too. And I mean, obviously, it's also the National Book Critics Circle, which is what we celebrated when Lori was on. So lots of
Yeah.
shots, lots of shots. The only one that we missed
So,
on was
Yeah.
National Book Award, which is bullshit.
so the genesis of this book was in your reading this image. It sounded like it was a very arresting image of a ship on a frozen river, and then the you fictionalize it by like, why didn't we place the sun there as well? And then that's the seed that germinates everything.
Well,
And
yeah, that's the the point where the whole book goes to and tries to arrive and finally arrives.
yeah,
There's this sort of reunion with the father, a reunion that
mm,
Melville never experienced, and that it's also some sort of wink homage to the ambassadors by Henry James, which is my favorite Henry James novel. There's this moment
okay.
where an old guy tells, uh, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one that I have read, and I really like that book too. There's something I was going to say about this, but now I've blanked out. Oh, I was going to say that the last part of this, the third part, especially the part that we read for today, starts to get very sad. Like, and I think it's like
Yeah.
really
Oh, yeah.
powerful, but like quite, I mean, it's quite moving and very like sad. And one of the things I really appreciate about all your books, but this one in particular, is that unlike, I feel like a lot of contemporary literature I've been reading has this like kind of aspect where things are going along. There's a sort of mystery, there's an engine, and then you don't not ever quite sure how things are working. And then all of the kind of plot and explanation is in the last like quarter of the book. It just becomes like all of a sudden here's like the real thing, as if like this is
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah.
important part, the climax, but beyond just a climax, like the whole of the plot is all centered there. And that's not the case with this. It's like very clear that the the plot such as it is kind of exists throughout the book. And I love that this book ends with that kind of sadness instead of this idea of like, okay, we got to have this like big crazy event that sort of like is the big thing that people are waiting for. I think it's a much more like the 19th century style of writing, but also like just a really impressive way to like make to create this world that we can live in, that we don't feel like we're having to like wait for like what the next thing is. You can just enjoy it along the way in a sense.
Yeah, I really like that. Well, it was some sort of, coming out of the three parts of the trilogy, I really wanted also, to have some sort of uh, arrived after a very long trip, arrived to the oasis and said, okay, here I can relax a little bit. It's a frozen oasis, but it's an oasis all the same. And I really like that, and I really liked the end of the book. I mean, the last pages. I'm particularly proud of the last paragraph. And there's one thing that it's impossible to translate it. I think that it's what the book ends with saying, and the word blah 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 will be sí, you know. But if you read it in Spanish as sea, it means so be it.
Right.
And at the same time, see phonetically is to look, to watch, to
Yeah.
finally see something. And I really like that sort of, it means the see plus so be it plus understand. Finally, you can understand it.
That's true. That's true. I didn't think about it as reading it in Spanish. I just assumed it would have that the word "see" would have been in Spanish too. But if the word "see"
No,
is
no. In Spanish is see. It writes. You write it the same, but it's sea also.
right.
Yeah.
That's super cool. Trying to think what else to ask you, man. This
While you're thinking, I mean, I have one question that's related, but I also we asked about, we're asking about what we thought about this last section. And I mean, so this is my second time reading through the book. And like I said last week, I hit a point where I was like, this is great because I remember none of the specifics. I remember the feeling of the book and I enjoy being in the book and in the text. But there's this pleasure, this delight in being able in certain ways to read it like it was the first time that I was reading it and sort of catching new sentences and catching new lines that like I remember I think the first week that we talked about the book, Brian's line of the week was one of the lines that I had originally marked when I was proofreading the book as like this is a banger of a line. And I didn't catch on it that time. And then Brian brought it up and I was like, yes, I remember that. But to Chad's point about this being sad, like it's incredibly sad and it's incredibly hopeful and I mean all the things about father and son and I'm not a son but it makes you value the ability to sit down and hear your parents or your grandparents' stories.
Mhm.
And I don't know, Rodrigo, how much of that sentiment is Melville based and how much of it might be personally based for you in terms of your parents, your grandparents. So I kind of wanted to ask about, I mean, not ask about it, but um, yeah, I don't know if you whatever commentary you might have on that.
You know, when the book came out in Spain and in Argentina, a lot of people who know me and know something about my prehistory and my sort of complex relationship with my father, who's dead now, and some of I sort of inherited a lot of my father friends. They're friends of mine now. You know, some of them are writers, and they were saying to me, "Haha, you finally got it even with your dad with this book, blah 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 blah." And I told them it's not the right way to read it. I mean, it's a book about my son more than my father. You know,
mm-hmm.
it's thinking about the future, not about the past.
Interesting.
All that sentimental part at the end of the book, it's not. I'm not Melville thinking about his father. I'm Melville's father thinking about his son. You know.
And that
So,
maybe yeah.
all the advice Alan Melville gives to Herman at the end of the book.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Uh, it's an advice that my father never gave to me.
Yeah. And maybe that does no, not maybe, but I think that does then speak to that hopefulness of it of
I think so. Yeah, yeah.
um
I think in a way it's a very optimistic. I mean, it's very sentimental, but it's also sort of optimistic in some sort of magical, frank, Caprian. It's a wonderful life way, you know.
yeah, there's a huge amount of acceptance.
Yeah,
And
and
that's
the
great.
idea that you can change some things. I mean, you can change and you can change things and you can go from worse to better.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like as you guys talk about that, one of the things that strikes me is like it is a very, in some ways, a lonely book because you do have Herman having lost his father, having like lost his friend and Nathaniel Hawthorne, like his close friend. They're not really like speaking. He also has like essentially lost his readership.
Yeah.
Had been there at the beginning, is no longer there, and it's just him. Like there's so much of it just feels like it's just him and his thoughts in this like kind of lonely world. And there's one quote that ties on that, but also leads in another question. Where on 279 says, "It's funny in books, people tend to praise the invented when it finds a way to resemble something real, and the real when it finds a way to resemble something invented. And damn you, common readers of normal novels, and bon voyage to all." Which sort of has that same like alone, goodbye fair world sort of vibe. But one of the things that all of your books that we've published revolve around, and this one does as well, is this creation of a reader. And I
Yep.
wonder if you could speak to that for a second in terms of like the way in which like both that like the reader is like in some sense almost more important than the writer. Like the writer is creating his readership, and also like
Yeah.
what you think of as being like the ideal reader for any of your books, but specifically this one. Like I think some people might be intimidated and be like, I've never read Moby Dick. Can I even like read this? But what do you think of like what you need to have as prerequisites? What is like the ideal reader? What reader are you creating?
I mean, Moby Dick is one of those books that if you don't read it, you know perfectly about what is. It's like the Bible. It's like Romeo and Juliet. It's like Don Quixote. I mean,
Yeah.
if you read it, you're going to have an amazing time. But I was watching the other day. I was surprised because I was watching again the Elvis '68 comeback concert when he sort of goes out dressed in leather. And I was completely shocked because there's a moment at the concert, at that segment of the TV show, where he sort of holds the microphone and makes like a gesture of throwing it away and screams, Moby Dick!
Whoa, no way.
Yeah, yeah. And I can almost be positive about Elvis. I don't think he read the whole of Moby Dick, at least. But he knows perfectly what it is, you know? And I thought I've lost my train of thought. You were asking me about
The creation of a reader.
yeah. Well, and I really like, you know, in that way, I think Melville didn't verbalize it. Maybe he did, but we don't know. But certainly he didn't wrote it. But I think it was, in a way, he must have been a little bit like, you know, Stendhal, who was someone that all the time he was saying, okay, I'm writing for the future. Nobody understands me now. My readers have not yet been born, but I know that they're going to come.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be here, but my books are going to be here. And I think that's the whole point. I mean, I'm not a very fan of the idea of posterity is going to recognize me. I mean, I don't think it's a healthy feeling for a writer, you know?
Right.
Sorry, this is moving a lot. But hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. But I think that it's like that. I mean, I don't think in those terms at all. I think that, you know, I don't remember who said that. Someone asked him about posterity, about his books, and he said, I don't care at all. I mean, the future can take care of itself. I mean, you don't have to think about the future. You have to think about what you're doing right now. But I think Melvill had some sort of suspicion that he was onto something, and that was going to be recognized sooner or later.
Yeah.
He was too strange and too original, you know. No.
Very, very true.
Well, I think whatever you do, you just got to make sure you put all of your works that have not been published yet into a trunk and say, upon my death, please burn this and do not open it no matter what. That way, for sure, it'll get opened, it'll be published, and you. That's the only way to make sure it happens.
Yeah,
If you put a bow on it and say, please make sure this gets published, it gets thrown away in the trash.
I mean, well, Henry James burned all he didn't want it to be published before he died. I mean, if you don't want it to be published, it's very easy to achieve that, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I'm all the time, you know, imagining, you know, Kafka saying to Max Brod, "Don't publish me," and winking his eye, you know, to him, you know, yeah.
Whatever you do, don't do it.
Yeah, don't do it. Please don't do it.
This is off topic a little bit, but question for you, Rodrigo, because it comes to, I think we might have touched on this earlier, but in April, we're publishing Alyosha Cole's Attila and a book about Alyosha Cole, also called Attila. And he
Yeah.
sort of fits this kind of model that we're talking about, where like it was someone who's dedicated, like Melville, in a sense, dedicated to art, dedicated to doing something, even if it didn't fit the time frame, it didn't fit the spirit of the times, it didn't really like work within that framework. And for him, he lived, completely obscurely, didn't really like have any readership and dies that way. And I think it's interesting like how both you and Javier Serena and Melville on this kind of tie together of like those authors who are weird that are just but don't back down from it. I feel like there's so much like I mean, we live in this United States where like Zuckerberg and Elon and whomever else is just bowing down to Lord Trump and like giving up on like values that values don't matter, and like these artists do stand for their thing. So you write Moby Dick and then you write, like you say, like write Pierre, write Confidence Man. These aren't books that are going to be like popular in any normal way at that time, and they do live in
Yeah,
popularity, but like they don't give in. They just went with what they believed in. I think that's very admirable, and for you to have written about it is really interesting because it kind of captures both that spirit of like the success of them
I know.
now,
Well,
but
but
not in the
that's
moment.
yeah, but that's the romantic and true view. But there's also another side of the same thing. I think that it's also true is that they really couldn't do it other way. I mean, they haven't in them, the knowledge or the ability to do some sort of normal pot
Mhm.
boiler or whatever, and I really like the idea. I think that that's important to think about, and I think now we're living in times where the lines between writers and narrators gets all the time more mixed and confused, and I don't have anything against I don't know, Sally Rooney
Mhm.
becoming a millionaire. I mean, she's good at what she does, and she makes lots of money and makes lots of money for his publishers, which are my publishers in Spanish, which is great, whatever, everybody's happy.
Mhm.
But, I, yes, I feel a little bit of uh, annoying noise when I read in a respectable place, or in the culture pages of very good, supposedly newspapers, when Sally Rooney gets compared to Joyce, Virginia Woolf, and Nabokov, you know,
Right. Right.
and and what it's not true.
No.
And if you want to put her in perspective in terms of the generational youth novel, I don't know. I think Chile Scenes of Winter by Ann Beattie is much, much better.
Hmm.
If
Yeah.
you want to read that sort of book.
Yeah.
But as I said, I don't have anything against the existence of that sort of literature, especially if it's well done, and it's delivers, and the people who wants to read that uh, gets it. But what I don't like is like the idea of someone saying, "Okay, now I'm reading the new Virginia Woolf
Mm.
because they read it somewhere, and saying to themselves, okay, now I don't have to read Virginia Woolf because I'm reading the new one."
That's what I
Right.
was thinking is like that kind of like the people this is stereotyping very hard, but like the sort of fans, the super fans of the Sally Rooney, the like watch the shows and are like super excited about our next book. I don't think they go back in time to read Virginia Woolf or to see any of those kind of
I,
influences.
I don't think Taylor Swift fans go back to listen to Johnny Mitchell.
We're gonna take shots at all sorts of people. Like, yeah.
No, no, I think
No,
We're
they
no,
they
no, no,
don't.
but
They
no,
don't.
no, no, but at least I think they're great. I think they're artists. I think they're great professionals.
Yeah.
I think that they really accomplish what they try to accomplish.
Yes.
I mean, Sally Rooney doesn't want to write Mrs. Dalloway,
No.
but someone
No.
is saying she did.
So to tie this back into what I was asking though, like the Taylor Swift and Sally Rooney creation of their audience. Like think of an artist as like or any artist as creating their listeners, their viewers, their readers. Like
That's great.
they're not almost not creating an audience because their audience is sort of this mass populace. This is sort of taking, very simple look at like how mass culture works. But in a way, like Sally Rooney would like to not create a reader because everyone can be her reader in a sense. Like there's no bar to entry, there's no like teaching you how to read the books. They're just so flat and on the surface. There's not really like a need for that. You can analyze them, you can dig into it, that's all
Yeah.
fine.
No,
They're fine. But like to just digest it,
yeah,
boom.
but you think that the Beatles also did it, but
Yeah,
nobody was saying that the Beatles were the new Mozart.
right. Right.
And
They
that's
Very
where
were the
they went
Beat-
wrong. They could have been big. They could have been huge.
no, they were the Beatles were being the Beatles, and that was enough.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can't even spell right. I mean, come on.
Yeah, exactly.
Generational problem, man. Use a dictionary. Christ.
Yeah,
Too high for that, man. Don't worry.
yeah,
Don't worry about it.
yeah.
Well, I was going to ask that while you guys were talking about the Sally Rooney comparing Sally Rooney to Virginia Woolf. I mean, it's also fair to ask what generation are the people writing these opinion articles or these critiques or these reviews about who are comparing, Sally Rooney to Virginia Woolf, or who, saying that Taylor Swift is the new Joni Mitchell. Are these people of Taylor Swift's generation? Are these people who are younger, who are they're just not informed because the people, you know what I mean? Like what age groups are we talking about?
It's a mystery. I don't know. I don't know.
Like, is it James Wood coming out and saying that Sally Rooney's like, I doubt that he would.
No, no,
Like,
no, not James Wood, but I read reviews in El País in Spain that say something like that, and I think even in the Guardian they were saying she is our best writer in English now,
Yep.
which
mhm.
I don't know.
It's
Define best. I mean, best can be lots of things, you know.
Define now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It is interesting. It is. I agree. It's very. I mean, it's very complex too, because you do want, like you say, like she's super successful. Good for her. She does exactly what she wants to do. At the
No,
same
no,
time, like,
no, and she's very good in what she's trying to
yep,
do.
yeah.
I mean, she's the best. She's the best in her field.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And yet there is like that.
I prefer Lana Del Rey, but that's another thing.
And it is like it is that it becomes overshadowing in that sense, like
Yeah.
where like the person at the time becomes the person at the time in a way that like that does get reflected a little bit in here, where Hawthorne was popular during his time, correct?
Hawthorne was popular, and but he was also very strange, a very
Oh yeah.
strange man, very reclusive, and he was known to the way the method he had for writing was going to the beach and going one way then the other and talking aloud, and then he just transcribed what he was talking during his walking, you know. So he was really strange, and the relationship between them two, it's amazing, really.
I love that we talked about all of that and like the next page last week, and then the next
I
page
listened to
for this
it,
week
yeah.
was the exact quotes. It was the exact thing. Like we could have gone one page further and just like captured it all right there. But
When he goes to London and they meet again. I
yeah,
mean, yeah,
that and like the
yeah,
letter that he writes that I was quoting from, like the letter that he
yeah.
writes. And then I flipped the page and I was like, son of a bitch, it's right here. Like I didn't realize the next step.
Yeah, yes, yeah. I was listening to it and smiling, you know, and saying,
Oh God. Oh, this is one of the ones I have marked as like related to what we were just talking about. We're on 248 and 249. It's talking about the Confidence Man, his masquerade a la Chaucer in the Canterbury Tales, with a con man hoodwinking all the passengers on a steamboat bound for New Orleans, taking place on the 1st of April in 1857, and soon to be published on that exact day. An idea that my somewhat naive publisher thought to have some marketing or commercial appeal, which, mind you, we're publishing both of the Attilas on April 1st for that very
okay,
so like oh, this is like
it's going to be a smash. It's going to be very
shot across
successful.
shot across the bow. It's a naive publisher thinking
Yeah.
that that'll be useful.
Which
But
brings me to my question. Rodrigo, you are it seems pretty confirmed that you are team. There is a singular confidence man in that book who is just
I
grifting
think so.
everybody.
Yeah, I think so.
Do you have receipts? What's your what's your reasoning? What's your reasoning to this? Because I have a hard time believing that even in the 1800s, people could be so easily duped by like different colored mustaches and different hats.
I just knew it. I don't know. I just thought about it, and I felt that it was some sort of thing that was done a few years, well, many years after, in a much more playful and joyful way by Chesterton, who all the time was like masquerading people and people with different personalities, and the man who was Thursday and Man Alive. The book, I felt that there was some sort of playful, malignant way of displaying this sort of huge cast, but with one. It reminded me in a way of those movies with Alec Guinness, where he made a lot of roles, and Doctor Strangelove, with Peter Sellers doing different characters. It reminded me of that.
I think we mentioned the Kroll show at one point too, didn't we, Chad?
I don't remember now.
Or kind of like the Key and Peele sort of Kroll show, or the Saturday Night Live aspect of it, of like everyone, like that it's for the entertainment value. So maybe the way Rodrigo's describing it now, it makes me think that it could also be one of like the earlier forms of suspension of disbelief. Like it's such a basic suspension and a basic form of disbelief. Like you're not being asked to believe in wizards and spell casting. You're just being asked to just given to the fact that this guy truly could be hoodwinking an entire steamboat of like 45 passengers over and over again.
Yeah.
I mean, I have my own take on it, but I think what we're not thinking of that actually probably is much closer to the truth of that book and the reality of it is like the bad guy in Scooby-Doo, where like you come up and like tear off one mask, really. Tear off the next mask, tear off the next mask until you get to like the local townsman. That's
the owner, the owner of the amusement park.
Yeah, exactly. It's perfect.
In the end, it's the steamboat that's been grifting everyone the whole time.
That's kind of my thought on it, is that it's the spirit of something. It's the spirit of the times more than it is an actual person. But
I just feel it operates better as a piece of satire if it's one person changing faces and grifting everybody. It's funny.
But it's something that in a way it's in. Sorry, Brian.
You go ahead.
No, but I think it's something that it's in all Melville's books, and especially in the first line of Moby Dick, when it says "Call me Ishmael," he is implying that his real name is not Ishmael. You can call him Ishmael, but who knows? Maybe his real name is Bartleby.
Oh, I never thought of it that way. Shoot.
Was that isn't the start of a Sally Rooney book, I think? Call Me Ishmael, if I recall. I'm not good with literary history, but
but I always felt that he's saying like, okay, you can call me Ishmael if you want.
Right.
Be my guest. Call me Ishmael,
Damn it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, like that. I mean, Pierre and the Ambiguities, or the Ambiguities is the full title. There's a lot of that running through Melville, obviously.
No, and Pierre. I mean, the ambiguities. He's announcing it right in the title.
Yeah.
The
Confidence Man, his Masquerade. All these are
the same thing.
Sort of just on the nose.
Yeah.
Moby Dick or the Whale.
And it's the same thing with for example, Billy Budd, that he's executed, but he's in a way Billy Budd is like some sort of Moby Dick. He can symbolize lots of things for different people.
Yeah.
I was watching something on Melville last week, and it had closed captioning on, and instead of Billy Budd, it said Billy Butt throughout the entire thing. And now I can never. It'll always be Billy Butt from some captioning mistake. That's gonna live in rent free in my head for the rest of my life. It's Billy Butt. And I'm just like, oh, this is from like,
Well,
who's it?
that's another way of saying the same. Billy, but
Yes, exactly.
It's true.
maybe Ishmael. You
Yeah.
know.
That's true. There, there are so many lines I like from this part, but I just don't want to be reading them all to you. Although I do love that on 276, which I think I'll name this episode, is the line that starts that section. What comes next is what remains. Which is that not exactly a line from Invented Part?
Probably.
I think it is. It's in one of the three, but it's like that
Yeah.
exact line. I was like, that's
Yeah.
perfect. Like it ties right in.
No,
It's
and
either
it's
that or
amazing.
David Bowie.
Yeah, and it's amazing because I think I have this podcast with David Neyman,
Mhm.
and he quoted me something about other book of mine that I don't remember which one, but I haven't remember having written that. And he read, something like the sons begin being footnotes to his parents, and finally the parents became footnotes to the sons. I wrote that, and it's this whole book, in a way.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you're like, wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I didn't remember that.
I think
I
almost
should have
related
used
to
it.
your question, Brian, about Pierre. That's kind of the way that you have to live as an author is forget everything that happened before. Just keep going.
On to the next one.
No, but the thing with Melville, and that's why I made this some sort of parallelism uh, about Moby Dick and the White Album by the Beatles, which it's called the Beatles, but it's the White Album, and it's white, and it's a whale of a double album in a way. And both of them, in Melville, he uses everything that went before him and sort of predates and pre-announces everything that is going to come after him.
Yeah.
And the Beatles, the album works exactly the same way. They are all that, and there's after that there's Americana and indie and punk and heavy rock and all the things that came before them.
Yeah. It's very true. It's very true. It's good alchemy of bringing together those things from past and future.
Yeah.
And that's really like where this book sits. I mean, the idea of like Herman being sort of unmoored from time
Yeah.
in
That's
a
that's
Billy
that's
Pilgrim
the
way
thing.
is able to allows him to like see the past, but then also like that future. Referencing the Joyce reference in this section is another one of those along to
Yeah,
go.
and there's the September 11th thing, and it's
Number
when
11.
there's a part then when he goes into a tavern in the New York harbor, and they're singing songs of the White Album, the
Yes.
sailors, So
Yeah. I love that because it does there's so much about that as like a kind of like not rhetorical trick, but as like a narrative trick that allows this to have so much breadth to it and to not feel like it is like you talk about this a bit. I don't have the exact quote here, but like where there's that hesitancy about reading books that are about authors in the sense of like a real author becoming like and this frees itself from being like how much of this is actually true, how much of this is a biography by allowing that to exist. And it raises then the stakes to a different level. Like it changes it from like, okay, I'm describing the intricacies of who Melville was and imagining like what his thoughts are and like how this would work, blah, blah, blah. And there was this real event. There are these real things that happen. But this allows it to be more of the meditation on creation and on how things can come seemingly out of nowhere. Even like with that Beatles album, like you say, like the White Album does look backwards and incorporates that, but it also is such a like these great artworks that seem to move the needle and like move
mhm.
things ahead and are actually innovative and not just like repetitions, but are actually like something new. They're so rare and like the kind of the by being able to unmoor from Melville from time and to explore it in this way sort of brings into focus like that idea of like there's some sort of something that happens and whatever that might be is like what you're kind of keep exploring and can never be answered because it like that inspiration comes from somewhere.
Yeah. Well, and there's you already know this, and you mentioned it. It's some sort of my way of saying thank you to a very important book to me. That's Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. Not just the idea of being unstuck in time, like his protagonist, like Billy Pilgrim. But when he describes these artifacts, the books of Tralfamadorians, this is that everything happened at the same time, and there's no moral, there's no ending, there's no beginning, And I really like that. I really like that. And I think if I had to be sincere, it's the only way I know how to do it. I remember I always wanted to be a writer since I was a kid, but I suspected that I wouldn't be able to be like a classical writer in terms of chapter 1, chapter 2, this goes with this, blah, blah, blah. And I remember the intense relief I felt when I read Slaughterhouse-Five, thinking, okay, you can do it this way also, It was the same thing I felt when I saw 2001 for the first time, and when I listened to A Day in the Life for the first time, when I said, okay, you don't have to be like so shaped, so respectful of the idea of narration. I really love 19th century novels that are completely classical. I'm not against that. I envy that. But I never won't be able to do it, I think. So it was great, to think, okay, you can do it this way.
I've never mentioned this, but my daughter has a Slaughterhouse-Five tattoo.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and so it goes.
Well, so it goes. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Oh, I thought her back was just an entire firebombing of Dresden with skeletons. It's not
true. She has like 45 tattoos. So
yeah. Well, and remember, you have Billy Pilgrim buried
in Rochester,
right there, there, in your backyard,
just in the absolutely right there.
Yeah,
that's a night of soup we don't want to talk about. That we moved to literally our backyard. Yes.
Okay.
There's other things buried there. So that's not a good thing to say.
A cat.
Yeah, a cat. So Rodrigo, like what's next for you? What are you working on now?
Well, I finished a small book that's small essay that's coming out in March.
When you say small, what do you mean by small? Because I was going to say, I think
that's like 400 pages.
No, 120 pages.
No way,
Rodrigo. That's a chat book.
No, yeah, but because it's going to be published on an imprint that you can go further than that. It's like that limitation, and it's about because in April, next April, The Great Gatsby is going to be 100 years old. So I wrote this book that's called The Little Gatsby.
Oh.
And it's an essay on my reading of The Great Gatsby and the story and how Fitzgerald wrote it. In fact, it's another writer that he started well and been celebrated, and then he faded, and then he had to wait for The Great Beyond to be considered a classic. American literature is full of those sorts of vanishing and these ups and lows, And I'm really trying. I think I want to try again writing short stories. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it, but I sort of developed like some sort of system that I'm not going to tell you on the air in what consists. But I'm going to see what happened with that. And of course, I play lottery every week, That's what I'm really considering.
Yeah, if you don't, you never know.
Yeah, I mean that's the prize I want to win.
Yeah, yeah, same.
And I was remembering the other day that Vladimir Nabokov, he never got a prize. He never won a prize. Not one.
Anything, did he? Like nothing.
Nothing.
It's crazy to think about now, but like, again, although Nabokov was very well respected in his time or popular, but we have to sort of flip that switch as you're saying that, in which we went from like, you write things for posterity or whatever, and then now it's like, no, you write things for success now. or people are, because of like the influencer culture and the way that things have shifted, everything is about the
No, sorry, Chad. Now you write things for Netflix.
Yeah. Or if you're really slumming it, Amazon Prime.
I mean, right for success is a very noble feeling compared to that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you seen the
I
100 Years of
remember.
Solitude program? Speaking of,
Sorry?
have you seen 100 Years of Solitude on Netflix?
Yes.
What did you think of that?
I don't know. I don't know what to think.
It's super
No, but it's amazing. It's another example, perfect example that it happens the same with Moby Dick or with The Great Gatsby. If you take out the prose and leave the plot, I mean, The Great Gatsby is some sort of romantic nonsense.
Yeah.
It's like some sort of vaudevillian romantic, with people coming in and coming out, and completely implausible. Same thing with Moby Dick. It'll be like some sort of people. Okay, let's go kill a whale.
Yeah. On a
You
ship.
know? Yeah.
Yep.
That's all.
Yep.
And it happens. I mean, when it's in fact it's very strange because it's you see the series on Netflix of 100 Years of Solitude, and it works as the illustrations of the book, not as a book.
Yeah.
I mean, if you stop the image and froze the image, you have illustrations to put between the pages of the book.
Mhm.
There,
Brian was going to say something.
you're saying something.
Oh
But
no, it was on topic, and we moved past it, so it wouldn't be on topic anymore.
roll it back.
Topic of cancer.
Oh no, yeah.
I thought you were gonna say,
Yeah, I want to watch the Netflix of that.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
that would be amazing. Yeah, that 100 Years of Solitude is a trippy show to watch because it really does feel like, my friend said this, I'm sort of stealing his line, but it does feel like a BBC documentary version of 100 Years of Solitude. Like it's not really a book at all. It's like, or a film. It does feel like a weird.
No, and you know that there were lots of articles here in newspapers and in Latin America saying, okay, it's not that good, but at least it's going to make people go to the book and read it. And I felt, but I felt completely the opposite. I saw this and said, I don't want to read this.
Right. I feel the same. Although what I was thinking is like there's a number of Garcia Marquez books I've never read, and I wanted to. It did make me want to go and read those, weirdly, because I was like, I like him, but I just never, I didn't read everything because he's got quite a few books. But in relation to that, and this is what I was just looking up to make sure I've got it right, is that it didn't make 100 Years of Solitude a bestseller again, but an NFL football player reading a book called Inner Excellence on the sidelines of a football game did make that the #1 bestseller for a time. So here again, the art.
Welcome to the real world.
To be fair, this book, this Inner Excellence book, is written by probably the greatest grifter of all time. Like, it sounds like someone who has been straight grifting, so it does fit into this season very well. He is a performance coach of mental skills, and his PhD was based on interviewing 39 MLB GMs and field managers on how to build a championship team, which is
well. But I hope no one says that he's the new Virginia Woolf. the Virginia Woolf of the field,
He's the new Napoleon Hill.
Exactly. No, I remember perfectly reading 100 Years of Solitude and having a great time. I was like 12 or 13 or 14, but I saw the series and I'm not going back there. I already been there.
I mean, to be fair, there's some solid good nudity in it. I suppose it's got that going for it, question mark.
Well, they fuck a lot. They're fucking
A
all the
lot.
time. Yeah.
There are parts of the first few episodes that you watch where it's like, this scene exists for one reason. Like, this is a very long scene. That is like
No,
quite explicit.
I remember the producer. No, I imagine the producer, watching the first cut and saying, "We need more sex in this." Go back to my condo and fuck a little more.
Oh,
Somebody call craft services. We're gonna need them.
Yeah.
so I think
Electrolytes and some protein bars.
God, well, we should probably start wrapping up here with our line of the week, and then I think we can announce we have plans for the next 3 seasons, but we'll just announce the one today, the next one. But Brandon, do you have a line of the week?
I do. I have 2 lines.
Ooh.
If you will humor me. The first line is on page 281,
Okay.
and it says, I have preferred to fail with originality than to succeed as an imitator.
Damn it.
Yep.
That was mine too. That one's solid.
Oh, okay.
That's a way to convince yourself that you're doing the right thing when you're not doing it.
And then my second line comes from this book called Moby Dick. It goes like this. I look, you look, he looks, we look, ye look, they look. And very poignant scene in Moby Dick that I always loved. And this book made me think about that quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, but my favorite part in Moby Dick, I think it's quoted in Melville, that chapter that's titled "The Fountain," where Melville sort of suddenly appears in the book.
Yeah.
It says, I'm writing this day at this hour, this time. I
My line was also Brian's line. So
I'm sorry, I could have picked a different line. Shoot.
how would you have known? How would you have known? Great minds, Brian. Great minds.
Yeah.
Sorry, I froze for a second. So hopefully I didn't miss anything super crucial, and hopefully anyone who's listening that still played. But there we go. I do have a favorite line though that's not the same as yours, Brian, which is from 271. Herman, here's my message in a bottle. Do whatever you want to do so long as you do not make the error I made of convincing myself that I wanted something I didn't really want and that I didn't want what I really wanted.
Good advice.
Yeah. Whoa, shit. The cat just jumped for the table and missed. Just straight missed. I haven't seen that happen in a long time.
Give that advice to your cat.
Yeah, exactly. You don't know what you want.
Don't be like me. It's the greatest advice you could give. Don't be like me.
Yeah.
So, Brian, do you want to announce what the next season is? It'll be the 25th season of the 2-month review, the first being the invented part. So this is like perfect.
Wow.
The 4th time that we've done one of your books. So you constitute like a good chunk, 1/6 of the books that we've covered in the podcast have involved you, which is
you're all going to heaven when you die.
And we do still need to do Bottom of the Sky at some point, and I think we could do that by pairing it with something that would make sense as well. But Brian, you came up with the next season, so why don't you introduce it?
All right, so for season 25, there was a book that just won an award. It's pretty popular. It's called James by Percival Everett.
I read it.
And I thought it'd be very fun to pair with Kathy Acker's Empire of the Senseless. Both of them discuss Huckleberry Finn in very interesting, unique ways. So I thought it'd be a fun compare and contrast to see how artists are inspired by previous texts. Not that we ever do anything like that on this show.
0%.
Great.
Awesome. Good. Sounds great.
What did you think of James, Rodrigo?
I liked it. I really liked it. I think it was good, really. And I think I like the author in particular, because he's pretty astute and pretty intelligent in being, an African American writer, and at the same time, sort of being a renegade of the idea of being an African American writer. I like that.
Yeah, like with Erasures, really, really
Mhm.
brings
Yeah.
that home. I don't know if you've read this before, but one of the books of his that I really quite like is from, I guess, 2004. Man, I'm getting old. A History of the African American People, proposed by Strom Thurmond, as told to Percival Everett and James Kincaid, which is a brilliantly funny satire and wonderful. I hope that people listening to this do know Strom Thurmond still. I mean, that was very that was very influential as a prick during my time growing up, but
Yeah.
Wonderful filibuster. Yeah.
yeah, super racist piece of shit. Burns in hell. But so that's it. So James will be next, and we'll do James first, and then Empire of the Senseless. I think that probably makes the most sense.
So you'll keep on with the masquerades in a way.
Yeah, Kaija.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Kaija, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I actually found a backup line, another line that I had marked, that it can lead out on, or if you want to do, it's a good one to lead out on, actually.
Okay, we'll leave it on. So thanks, Rodrigo, for coming on and talking to us again, and thanks for everyone who's listening and has followed along this whole season. Remember, the grifter's gonna
Take it off.
which I had to
Okay.
take off.
Okay. I'd like to thank you all for publishing the book, really, and to Will Vanderheiden for writing it, because he's the writer of the book. He wrote it in your language. I wrote another book. He wrote this, and I'm pretty pleased, and at the same time a little bit disturbed about my books being in long lists and short lists, and even winning prizes in other languages, but not mine. Never.
You just sent me a bunch of marks about or a bunch of papers where the most recent book was like the book of the year in several
No,
places.
but those are newspapers lists, end of the year list. That doesn't count as a prize.
Okay, fair enough.
But in a way, I'm like Nabokov. Never got it. So okay, it's good. It's good.
Joyce Nabokov.
And if I win the lottery, I'm going to buy me an hotel in Switzerland, and I go live there. That's all.
Oh yeah, that would be ideal. So if you're listening, be sure and rate and subscribe. Tell your friends. Make sure that you're listening to the right feed. The 2-month review feed will be going away after this season. So if you're not subscribed to the right one, it's linked to in the show notes. Be sure and subscribe to that one, both on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Just make sure that's the right one. And we'll be back in a few weeks with James by Percival Everett. Maybe you want to read Huckleberry Finn in the meantime. Get your references going.
Yeah.
And that's all I've got.
Okay, my pleasure. It was great seeing you, talking with you again.
Thank you for coming on.
My pleasure. Really amazing.
What's your line, Kaija?
My line, all right, from page 279 of Melville, it is. It's funny. In books, people tend to praise the invented when it finds a way to resemble something real, and the real when it finds a way to resemble something invented.
I read that in the middle of
readers. What?
I read that in the middle of this episode.
No, I didn't. I have a head cold. Bye. Fuck everyone.